Shelley, your LinkedIn headline says startup builder. So tell us, what are you building?
Intelligent identity infrastructure is what we're building. So basically, the internet wasn't built with humans in mind. It was very much built with machines, talking to a machine, and knowing that those two things you can trust across a network.
In this modern world, the internet age where identity is very important because lots of scams happening around identity, and we really need to make sure that the person is who he is saying he is. Yeah.
More important than ever.
Yeah.
I completely agree.
What was life like before you started SQR?
I've always loved a complex challenge, and I'm always incredibly curious as a human being, and that's been sort of since birth, I think. So in one way, nothing has changed.
What were the obstacles and how did you overcome them?
I mean, that we could go into granular detail on the obstacles there are. Fundraising is tricky. Finding your idea, product market fit. There's so many things. The biggest thing that has been, I would say, if we could overshadow all of those like technical details almost around a startup being hard, is getting over myself. Like my own ego is being my biggest challenger.
Shelley, your LinkedIn headline says startup builder. So tell us, what are you building?
Intelligent identity infrastructure is what we're building. So basically, the internet wasn't built with humans in mind. It was very much built with machines, talking to a machine, and knowing that those two things you can trust across a network. My background has been in telecoms of the last 10 years and very much seen how data flows across the world, but actually that it never really considered people and how do people operate on top of that digital infrastructure. Or physical infrastructure, even in telecoms. And so that got me to understanding, some really key concepts around standards, interoperability, security by design, things that the telecoms world has already nailed. They've done this, it works. And actually, the identity world is almost like the telecoms world was back in the day, where it's quite siloed. They don't things don't speak to each other. We struggle to trust different systems because they're all built in their sort of unique ways. But actually, there's a lot of harmonization of standards that have been going on in the background for years. We're getting to this really interesting precipice globally where we need more privacy as people. We also need more efficiency because we're having to prove who we say we are again and again and again in all of these different areas, which is really frustrating as a human being trying to interact with any services digitally or even in person. And so that standards play a huge part in identity. Standards play a huge part ecosystem of being able to have trust that the person that is there saying that they are who this is actually who they say they are. And then also the person that's doing that process needs to also trust you. So it's a real ecosystem, there's a real balance across there, which again in telecoms it's been a thing that there has been achieved over time. So
Yeah.
yeah.
In this modern world, the internet age where identity is very important because lots of scams happening around identity, and we really need to make sure that the person is who he is saying he is. Yeah.
More important than ever. I
Yeah.
completely agree. I mean, I would probably would say
Yeah.
that, but when you've got the world of deep fakes now, where you have got, am I who I say I am? Am I turning up as
Mhm.
me? Or even if, it's my dad saying to me, oh, can you transfer me £20 because I've lost my wallet and I need a bus? Or, like, if that comes through onto your like WhatsApp messenger or your WhatsApp or your messenger, you're going to go, well, that's probably them. They're now, and you can do, you only need a very few seconds of video to then create videos that are not.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's really, I mean, that's one part of identity itself, but there's the other part, which is these increasing compliance and legislative and regulatory drivers, which are the fact that, we have to prove more and more that we are
Yeah.
who we say
Yeah.
we are for,
Interesting.
anti-money laundering and
Yeah.
Yeah, so
This is really interesting. This is really interesting. I love that. When I was just browsing your website and was seeing that, identity verification, I was like, oh my God, this is something really interesting. Shelley,
I
what was
mean,
like?
I would say I'm now an identity nerd. Is that's
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
I've definitely fallen into that, and it really it because it's about human impact, and I
Yeah.
am so driven by human impact. I often in any technical company, you can really get drawn into the how, like how does it happen? How's it encrypted? How's
Mm.
the data moving? How's the transit layer? All of these different things that are really important fundamentally to the solution, but actually it's like, what is the impact on the human,
Yeah.
and like
Yeah.
how do you make someone's life better? And we always go back to our three core values, which is secure, efficient, and inclusive. And is everything aligning to those three values, um which should be in any identity system as fundamental principles anyway.
Yeah, that's really true. Values are so important, and I see that a lot of companies don't have real values, though they have some values, but they are just for the sake of to be written there, right? They are not actual values. Nobody just care about them much.
Yeah, for me, it was one of the very first things that was when SQR was in its like very infancy is mission, vision, values.
Yeah.
What is it we're trying to achieve? We're trying to make the world a safer place, essentially. Like that
Yeah.
is what we're here to do, and that's a really bit bold ambition, but
Mm.
actually. It's the mission and then those values that really underpin those things that we do every single day. And I absolutely love it when I hear one of my team and they'll say, "Oh, it's inclusive, isn't it?" And that's one of our values. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
that makes a lot of sense. And
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So next question I have for you is what was life like before you started SQR?
I've always loved a complex challenge, and I'm always incredibly curious as a human being, and that's been sort of since birth, I think. So, in one way, nothing has changed, but I suppose the big thing, the shift for me was from being I was, I suppose someone's number two before in different
Mm-hmm.
guises across my career in tech and in telecoms. I was, chief operating officer, managing director. I worked for somebody in that instance. So coming into having some ownership of something that was mine,
Mm-hmm.
and being, CEO, co-founder, that it was, I would say the biggest shift was around navigating uncertainty because um that is, there's so much more at stake when everything around you feels so
Yeah.
uncertain. And that's been huge growth. Personally, huge growth for me. There's a lot of things that I've had to I suppose come to terms with,
Yeah.
every day, not really knowing what could happen, and thinking, well, I'm going to pour my heart and soul into this, and it might fail, and I'm going to pour my heart and soul into this anyway, even if it does. And getting over yourself, getting over the fear, what are people going to think if I fail,
Yeah.
like what is
That
that?
is the biggest fear for most people, like what people would say if this doesn't
Yeah.
work out.
And that's the ego, isn't it? That's the
Yeah.
ego talking, saying, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough. But actually, like, wow, like I gave it a go. I
Yeah.
gave it a go and I put my heart and soul into it. And you know what I learned every single day? I have something to take away from this that money cannot buy. Like I could not
Mhm.
go on. I couldn't go on, I could have millions of degrees by now, I feel, because of
Yeah.
the deep knowledge and deep learning of experiential learning going through that journey.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is the, I think, biggest fear because 90% startups fail in the first few years of their existence, of the establishment. So, I mean, this is something scary, right? Did you have that
Yeah.
fear too? I mean, did you have that fear too?
I think there's an underlying fear
Yeah.
that, I think it's got less over time because understanding that there is so much out of my control.
Mm.
I can only turn up, do my best, go to bed. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
and with the right intention. Like I'm channeling the right intention, and I'm literally I am going to commit and give my best every single day. Some days that might be right, write that one really important email and then go and have a nap because you're so tired. Like that might be my best on that day, and that's okay. And because what's that like old adage that it's a marathon, not a sprint? It is, you obviously
I
want your
love that.
startup to
Yeah,
continue over time. You've got to be okay with yourself, but it doesn't mean that you can't go 1,000 miles an hour every single day.
yeah.
That's not possible. We're human, and we've got to keep that semblance of balance and self-care, to
Hmm.
know that actually if I'm going to burn myself out, my team are not, like, we're going to go home
Yeah.
because I'm so involved in the business day to day. Obviously at these early stages you would expect someone to be.
Yeah, you are a role model for your employees, your team members, and you are going to set the example for them. So if it's like a burnt out CEO or depressed or have anxiety on little things, definitely the leaders
You're,
need
and you're
to,
not you're
yeah,
not making your best decisions, are
yeah.
you either? You're not in the, I mean, I make absolutely my best decisions when I'm grounded, I am in my body, and I'm not, in my head for a million, like all the time, and overthinking. I'm like, how do I get to that place as much as I can, so
Hmm.
that I can make the best decisions, so that I'm not reactive to my team.
Yeah,
Again, I'm a human being. Things can be stressful, and
yes.
I can react, but actually to be able to step back, to acknowledge the reaction, acknowledge the emotion, and go, okay, what's going on here? And it might not actually be something that that person said to me. It might be something else, or the fact that I haven't slept very well the last few nights, or actually, what, I'm hungry. I haven't actually had any lunch yet, all of those things, or a
Yeah.
combination of the above.
That's a great takeaway, people who are listening right now, is just that decision making when you are grounded. Never take a decision when you are stressed out or have an anxiety or not in your body, on your mind for different things like racing around in your mind. And just don't take that kind of a decision and just be grounded first, calm down, and then make a decision which whatever is best for you. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've always been quite an intuitive decision maker. I've actually see it when I've got red flags. My personal red flags are when I'm very, like, maybe procrastinate, or I can't make a decision very easily. I'm like, what's going on? This is a sign. I need to, think. I now know I've got a list of things that help me ground. I go to the gym, do exercise, go for a swim. I like that. I live 3 minutes away from the sea, so I'm very lucky. I can go for a
Oh.
sea swim, go for a run,
Hmm.
go dance in my kitchen, put some music on, and the things that shake the energy through,
Yeah, yeah.
and help me get to a place where I actually, or have a sleep if it's
Yeah,
quiet.
yeah. And I see that this is the secret of the success, that successful startup that you are building.
Well, there's probably many things that are
Hmm.
help the successful startup, but I think that's
Yeah,
one of them.
I love
I think
that.
that's hard to tie it down to one thing, definitely, and it certainly doesn't all reside in me, because
Hmm.
my team are so fundamental. Obviously, if I was a horrible person to work with, they'd probably not be working with
Yeah,
me.
yeah.
So all those grounding things help, but
Yeah,
I cannot possibly do all the jobs. In fact, I would say, I can bring people together is one thing that I do really well.
yeah,
And again, I think a lot, like, my team are just incredible, and they, do their own pieces of the puzzle. But also at this startup level, you've also got to be really flexible, because, and I always say that if there's a brush in front of you, if there's a big mound of dirt in front of you and you've got a brush in your hand, you don't go, well, it's not really my job. It's like, actually sweep the thing out of the way and then
yeah,
go. But there's not an opportunity in a startup to say that's not my job, especially if you've got the tools, you can quickly
yeah.
just get it done and then communicate and say, I've done this, by the way. So yeah, I would say.
One of the qualities, many qualities that you have. And of course, it needs a lot of ingredients in a recipe. So if it's a successful startup, it's a dish. So lots of things will go
Yeah.
into it. Yeah. So
Yeah, I like that.
yeah, but energy is, I think, I believe that energy is everything. The kind of energy that you bring to the table, to your business, that is the most absolute thing to do. And this is something that people often miss on.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I can comment other than I suppose being in all the businesses or the startups or
Hmm.
the types of businesses. But I think for me, I'm very energy oriented.
Yeah, I can
And
see
so
that.
yeah, in fact my current like my CTO in the business, Mark, he's often comments, I just don't know. I've never worked with anyone that's got as much energy as you have, Shelley.
Yeah.
We're a few years in now, but trying to keep that alignment of energy, it's going to be sustaining. It's got to be sustaining to be an ongoing success of your
Yeah.
business. You can't just have these tiny bursts of like energy that
Yeah.
uh, then you fall off a cliff and then everyone's going, where have you gone? Where have you gone?
I 100% agree with that. This is so important. Like be on the high energy, so that, because that is contagious, people will just pick up on your energy very fast,
Yeah,
if it's
yeah, and
good or
it
bad.
is
Yeah.
so important. I yeah,
Yeah.
completely.
Shelley, you have gone from performing arts to tech. It's like I saw that on your profile and it actually interested me so much that I wanted to talk about this. How did that switch even happen? Why I'm asking is this. Because performing arts is a different feel, like it's more of feminine flow, right? It's like you're more of creative person there. Tech is all logical, where you are into that masculine logical part of yours, like that kind of that part of yourself. Of course, you need creativity to build a business. The kind of business you make, you need to be very creative to create that kind of product. But then these are two different things. So how did that switch happen?
Yeah, it's a really it's something that actually I think early in my switch of my career I was really embarrassed about, and I was
Mhm.
really like there was quite a bit of shame around the fact that I hadn't had all this experience in tech or telecoms at the time when I was in telecoms, and I was really like I didn't want to tell anyone that I was used to be a performing arts teacher, and I mean I was in education, so I'd done lots of things. I was an examiner, a teacher, a
Mhm.
course coordinator, and all of these different things in that 10-year career that I had pre this career, my second career.
Yeah.
Um, but the really interesting, I would always say there was never one thing that happened. Wasn't one day I woke up and I thought I'm gonna throw away this 10-year career I've
Mm.
had and start
Yeah.
again something else I don't know anything about. But it was a number of things. My contract where I was working came to an end. It was like that push pull and a bit of
Mm.
bravery sprinkled in, I think, is the essence of it. Someone was asking me to work for them, and they'd asked me for a good few years to do that, and I was like finally felt brave enough to take the move, and so leapt into it, and really just loved it. And I loved the time. It was terrifying because I felt so out of my depth with everything. I was, even things like at my previous, I'd always used a Mac for years and years, and then I get there and it's, even the fact that they were using, what's opposite to a Mac PC, they were using a PC, and I was like, oh, I haven't used Outlook for a long time, so it was really down to the basics in my first job, but I ended up becoming quite quickly the person that brought other people together in it for these really tricky, nuanced projects that no one really wanted to do. And the new lady would be like, oh, I'll give it a go. And then anyway, more of those came my way because I started to be quite good at them, it
Yeah.
seems. And I learned a lot by doing those quite complex problem solving
Mhm.
things. And so just got really hungry for more knowledge. Then I suppose the rest is history. 4 years later, 4 years after leaving teaching, I was the managing director of a startup mobile network operator, I would say. They were an internet service provider, but that had just recently got their mobile network operator license, and they wanted to build out a proper mobile network operator. And so that career trajectory like that is quite unusual.
Yeah.
So, but I'm very grateful. I'm very
Yeah.
grateful for the opportunities
Yeah.
that I've had, but also I go like pat myself on the back. Like
Yeah.
you got to be brave to take
Yeah.
some stepping out of your comfort zone and seeing opportunity maybe where other people didn't see opportunity.
Yeah. This is, differentiates the successful startups and the people who are not doing really well in that. As we just talked about, like 90% of the startups fail. And this is a scary thing to think, like, before people start up, because I think that nowadays a lot of people would like to start a startup. A lot of tech people, especially tech people, they would like
Yeah,
to
yeah.
start a startup. But
And
then,
it's almost in some ways the easiest time ever to
yeah, yeah,
start a startup. I mean,
yeah.
I would say for us, are we lucky or not? It's a really complicated thing for us to do. There's a lot of obviously compliance requirements, data security, things like that, which are expensive to put together, but they're not easily disrupted by AI. And that's obviously a good thing right now because
Yeah.
it's not that someone's going to come spin my business concept out of thin air with an AI, vibe coded tool. Um, but at the same time, there's more opportunities than ever to learn and find that information out and get the tools that to build things, prototype them, get them out there. So I think it's an exciting time to
Yeah.
start up and with a low risk.
Yeah, but then you need to have those kind of qualities, or if you don't have, you need to just keep developing those qualities along the way and just keep at it and not give
Yeah,
up. That kind of
yeah.
story.
There's a few things that it was actually at my university, when I first went on my first week of my degree, and I did a performing arts degree.
Mm.
And there was a lecturer, that visiting guest lecturer, that came in, and they said, who here can think of anything else other than, if you want to be a performer, if there's anything else you can think of it now. So I was thinking, well, I could do this or this and I was like, yeah. And then they said, right, okay, none of you that can think of something else will have what it takes to make it.
Mm.
And I was like that was I was thinking, yeah, I actually knew at that point, like I wasn't so committed to that path
Mm.
that I couldn't think of anything else. Like I could think of other things that I might want to do. And so that was really interesting visioning exercise. And then
Mm.
in this context, so it's like fast forward 20 years, in this context now, I often like the hard days, the days when it gets so tough and you just say, what am I doing? I could go somewhere else, have a much easier life. Doing something completely different, maybe. I've
Yeah.
got so many skills I could offer someone else. And then I go, but what would I do? And I can't, up until this point, well, not even up at this point in time today, I cannot think of one thing that I would rather be doing than this now. And that's when I know I just have to do the hard thing in front of me. Doesn't matter how hard it is. I just have to find a way over it. And that
Yeah.
might just be sat at my computer just looking at the document for 10 minutes or some inspiration comes, whatever it is. But the ability to turn up is a non-negotiable then. I have to turn up.
Yeah. So what kind of challenges you met with as you got along the way? You set up that company, it's quite
Yeah.
successful, it seems to be. So what were the obstacles and how did you overcome them?
I mean, that we could go into granular detail on the
Yeah.
obstacles there are. Fundraising is tricky.
Yeah.
Finding your idea, product market fit, all there's so many things. The biggest thing that has been, I would say, if we could overshadow all of those like technical details almost
Mm.
around a startup being hard, is getting over myself, like my own ego is being my biggest challenger.
Hmm.
Because the negative self-talk, one of the things that has been really hard for me is I'm very extrovert and I'm very energized and I can talk to a lot of people. I
Yeah.
don't really ever like being center stage. Like that's never, as I say that as a performer, I did perform nuts, but I would never want to be the only person that everyone's looking at me. That's not my feeling is not, I don't feel comfortable there. And I don't know, there's lots of people that do, but obviously when you do any early stage business, it is so much about that early stage team, especially founders. So the story of the business is your story, and
Yeah.
you can't at this point in time, the very early stages, and we're still there now, 3 years in, but those, it's hard, you can't untangle those things, that they exist together. And actually that's what, I speak to a lot of, potential investors, or I've been on some accelerator schemes that are, investors are looking, they're investing in the team, the founders, how does that work? Who are they? And what's that story they're telling? And does it align with the story that they believe in? Can you
Mm.
make them believe it? Because until you've got any traction whatsoever, it's just you and a
Yeah.
story. So to get someone else to believe, you have to believe in you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That is the starting point. When you don't believe in yourself, nobody else would believe in you.
Yeah, who's going to show up for someone that half believes in
Yeah.
themselves? And so putting myself out there has been a challenge where I've, often there's an amazing confidence coach
Mm.
called Kirsty Hulse,
Yeah.
and I was on an accelerator scheme backed by the UK government. And the part of it was, getting some of this confidence coaching that as this accelerator cohort, and she had this great analogy of cringe and send. So, type the email and then you might be cringing, but press the send button whilst you
Yeah,
cringe.
yeah,
Amount of times that sits in my head and going, oh, I don't want to send that. And actually, that overcoming that fear and showing up authentically as
yeah.
yourself.
As yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting that you're talking all about it because starting a startup takes a lot of things, and building a successful startup is such a big thing and something that people can be really proud of, right? Once you get everything right. What are you most proud of?
I find pride an interesting concept.
Mm.
I mean, the things that I'm most proud of, like they don't exist in my work world almost, they're my kids, they're
Mm. Yeah.
the things those are the things that I'm like, oh, I'm so proud of you, like I feel that. I'm proud of my team when they come through and challenge, and the out the other side of it. Like that's I feel proud for that.
Yeah.
Proud of myself.
Yes.
I'm just going, how can I be better today than I was tomorrow?
Mhm. Yeah,
And
that is the most important thing.
yeah, and so almost pride is like I've achieved, like I am the best at whatever that one thing is. It's like
Yeah.
there's always so much to learn, and there's always so much more growth that you don't know. You're never at the top of the hill for growth.
Yeah.
There's always the thing to unlock. Staying curious is the key to that,
Is the key to that. Yeah. Yeah, you never stop learning. You cannot afford to stop learning because until we are alive, we are learning or we are dying. So it's okay to like, it's better
I
to,
like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's better to
Yeah,
live than die.
and it is something that keeps me alive.
Yeah.
Like the feeling of being alive is that, like, oh, I didn't know that. And whether that's in external learning, or I'm still learning so many things about who I am.
Yeah.
And I would say that about anyone doing any startup. If you're not going through some really deep personal growth, then it's worth doing a startup just for that.
Yeah,
To
yeah,
just go
absolutely.
through the personal growth.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that. I say that in like for myself in my business, I say that 80% I work on myself and 20% I work on my business. So this is the ratio, typical ratio
Yeah.
that most of the work, most of the hours go on my own self-development. Like how can I be better than before, like better than the last day, as you just said. It's so important that keep progressing and keep being proud of yourself. And it's never enough, like never enough, as in that it would never end. The journey of self-development would never end. It
But
can,
every day, if you can go, I like to go to that point
yeah,
before, you can show up as your best self that
yeah,
day.
yeah,
Like that is literally the only thing that matters.
yeah,
I'm never going to shame myself for that
yeah,
I would have done historically. I'd have gone, oh, that was not good enough, and you didn't do that quick enough, and such and such did that better than you, or all of this ego talk. But
yeah,
actually, I'm doing my best. I'm doing my
yeah,
best, my
yeah,
best intention. And if that doesn't work, if it means the business doesn't work because of that, then I've learned something and I've
Yeah.
contributed.
I love that attitude. Yeah.
I hope I've contributed to a team that
Yeah.
have loved working together, that have grown themselves, that have learned, that have got an incredible CV they could go on to do something else with, that those things help me sleep at night.
That's beautiful. Shelley, what does your typical day look like as a startup CEO?
Is there a typical day? I do not have a typical day.
Yeah.
I don't think that that for one for those things, exist. I've got a young daughter. So, that it comes with its own things as, school today I've done both the school drop off and the school pick up.
Hmm.
And that's a completely different day. But last week I was in London from Monday to Friday, and I call it my guilt-free work because I don't have parenting that's
Yeah.
involved in that. So I literally, sort of like get up and sort of work. But as I say work, like I love it. So it doesn't always feel like work, which I
Yeah.
think is a huge privilege. So, that could, I would say the common denominator for me is meetings. It's speaking to people, uh,
Hmm.
speaking to the team, external, whether that be, external sales style conversations, projects, bringing external collaborations together to work together. It is all about quite good at giving myself the breaks in between meetings
Hmm.
now.
Yeah.
That we sort of didn't get in COVID, and we just back to backed everything. And I love talking to people. I
Yeah.
love communicating with people, listening to people, learning from people. And so it is an absolute joy, really, for me to be speaking to people most of the day.
Yeah. Okay. That's great.
Yeah.
Now, if your journey was a Netflix movie, what would the title be?
Do you know, I feel like I had, I would say maybe The Accidental Founder would be
And why is that?
this is definitely the memoir that I probably should never say. But I
Yeah.
always say that, I sort of accidentally find myself here and I can't leave.
Mm.
It's that, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I
Yeah.
mean that in a way that I just saw opportunity. And also I would say one of the things I did was give some financial freedom to myself,
Hmm.
which wasn't a huge amount of financial freedom by any stretch of the imagination, but it allowed me to leave my last employed job and have time to figure out what I wanted to do. And actually, I stepped into that uncertainty, which again is another big lesson
Yeah.
about stepping out of your comfort zone, stepping out when it feels right, but not knowing that it might be right or not, and
Mhm.
trusting that it will. And that's how I felt at the time. But I didn't know what was going to be behind the next door and what that would be. But I had laid the foundations for that. So one of the things that I did was so I obviously left teaching, and then any pay rise that I got from my baseline. Well, actually, I took a pay cut actually when I left teaching, and I had the best summer of my life. My son who's 21, he
Yeah.
wasn't one then, he was like 10. We had the best summer, and I was like, wow, I've got less money, and we've had the best time.
Hmm.
Like, just as amazing. So actually, what I did for a lot of years is I didn't pay. I paid myself that amount to live on,
Hmm.
and then I saved everything else.
Oh,
So,
wow.
um, so then what that gave me was a buffer.
Yeah.
Every time I got a pay rise, I didn't pay it to myself. I just put more away,
Mm.
and this just worked for me at the time. I'm not saying this is like the recipe to success, but it gave me some money that when I I didn't need to turn up to work
Yeah.
to pay my bills, and the pressure wasn't there, so I turned up to work because I wanted to, and I loved it. And that's an
Um,
incredible privilege to have.
yeah.
And that little bit of freedom that I had to know that I could have some time, that I didn't just have to jump into another job. I could have some time to think about who I am, what I wanted to give back to the world, like what lit me up inside, like what gave me motivation to get up. And so I took some time out to do that, and then happened to bump into someone that had an idea, and then that we had a conversation, you know, that sort of, it just evolved. And now I
Yeah.
find myself here.
Yeah, I love that. This is such a big self-respect act when you say that, because you respect yourself enough to pay yourself first, because most of the times, like businesses, business leaders, they would pay themselves the last, like whatever is left, then they would say that, okay, this is the kind of money that they can claim. But it's so good to that you're talking about it on the show, that it's so important to pay yourself first.
I mean, I always feel like if I, it doesn't have to be, it has to be what I, you know, I've not got a fancy
Yeah.
showboat life.
Yeah.
I'm not popping the champagne every night, you know, and
Yeah. Yeah.
but I think there's an amount that's sensible.
Mm.
You have to survive, right? You
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
live. You have to know that you can afford to,
Yeah.
um,
It takes fear away.
it took so much fear.
Yeah.
It has taken so much fear away
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
me to know that my needs can be met and my
Yes.
family, you know, my daughter can be safe and well.
Yeah.
I think on the flip side of that is that I mean, I was a single parent teacher
Yeah.
for most of my life before that. I, you know, I had like a tiny amount of money after my all my bills went out to, you know, for clothes, holidays, food, fuel, everything, and not a lot of that. And that was, you know, we were talking a few £100s, and that really helped me have a healthy respect for budgeting.
Yeah.
um, but also, you know, that so many things in life you do not have to pay for, and can
Yes.
give you great joy.
Yeah.
And those things are spending time with friends, spending time with family. As I mentioned swimming at the beginning, you
Everything
go
money can't buy.
outside. Yeah, like literally
Yeah.
that those things are you know, those are joyful things. So
Yeah. I love that. Shelley, one message you would like to give to our audience, like any startup founder listening right now.
um you can do more than you think, I think,
Mm.
is the heart message from me today.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I need to elaborate more than that. Yes, get out of your own way, and you
Hmm. Yeah. This is interesting. And so how can people connect with you, and how can businesses support your business?
personally connect. Obviously, LinkedIn is the is the
Yeah.
one. So Shelley Langan Newton, I'm on LinkedIn. And then SQR is the business. If you need any identity proofing in your business needs, that is what we're here to do. So definitely get in touch. But other than that, yeah, I suppose go out and do more good in the world.
Thank you. It was such a wonderful conversation. I
Oh, thank
thoroughly
you. What
enjoyed.
a joy. What a
Yeah,
joy.
it was just really nice.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate your time and great questions.